It's the first, frankly speaking, of 2026. And welcome. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We are broadcasting live and proudly from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. I hope everyone out there made it safe, home safe from New York City for Zohran Mamdani's swearing in. I hope you send pictures from that historic event. We're going to be talking about it a little bit later on in the program. We'll kick off with a viewer comment. Mark starts off 2026 with, "Good morning, Frank." Well, good morning, Mark. How about some good news to start 2026? U.S. murder rates make largest yearly drop in 2025 thanks to Trump. And the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, is done and over. Well, the subsidies are done and over, not the actual Obamacare. That is still in existence. But yes, the subsidies are done and over with. So thank you, Mark. Some good news there. Unfortunately, I do not have quite as good news. Breaking story happening just a few hours ago. You may have missed it. President Trump and top Iranian security officials exchanged dueling threats this morning as widening economic protests swept across parts of the Islamic Republic. This is very big. The protests have grown very large, in some cases, according to Iran, so take it with a grain of salt, violent. This is further escalating tensions between the countries after America bombed Iranian nuclear sites back in June. Trump initially wrote on Truth Social, warning Iran that if it violently kills peaceful protesters, the United States will come to their rescue. At least 7 people have been killed so far in violence surrounding the demonstrations. Trump then wrote, just to elaborate, quote, "We are locked and loaded and ready to go." Whew. Shortly after, a former parliament speaker who serves as the secretary of Iran's Supreme National Security Council alleged on social media that Israel and the U.S. were stoking the demonstrations. Okay. Well, we know that their economy is in ruins. They bit off more than they can chew when they started really pushing that allegiance between China, Iran, obviously, and Russia. Then they started attacking, and people started to see that they were a paper tiger, that they did not really have much to attack with. And then we saw, of course, the bombing by the United States of the nuclear sites. Of course, the man from Iran offered no evidence to support the allegations, which Iranian officials have repeatedly made during years of protests sweeping the country. Quote, "Trump should know that intervention by the U.S. in the domestic problems corresponding to chaos in the entire region and the destruction of the U.S. interests. The people of the U.S. should know that Trump began the adventurism. They should take care of their own soldiers." That sounds like a weird translation website that they used, doesn't it? The current protests, now in its 6th day, have become the biggest in Iran since 2022. The demonstrations have yet to be countrywide and have not been as intense as those surrounding the death of Mahsa Amini, who was detained over not wearing a hijab to the liking of the authorities. Iran's civilian government under former President Mossad Pezeshkian has been trying to signal it wants to negotiate with protesters. However, Pezeshkian has acknowledged that it is not much he can do as Iran's currency has rapidly depreciated, with $1 now costing some 1.4 million rials. That sparked the initial protests. They said people are going hungry, and what happens when they go hungry? You start to see the unrest. So again, Trump saying on Truth Social early this morning, and again, I quote, "Iran that if it violently kills peaceful protesters, the United States will come to the rescue. We are locked and loaded and ready to go." Now, the New York Post editorial board wrote this yesterday, so before Trump posted that, saying, "With the people of Iran once again rising in protest against their oppressors, America's leaders should leave no doubt that they side with the forces of freedom and warn the gang that rules the country that Uncle Sam is watching." And really, Trump did do that this morning. Again, this piece written yesterday around 6 o'clock. This morning, about 3, 4 in the morning, was the post in support of Iran, or Iranian protests, excuse me. "Death to Khamenei," the crowds are now shouting. Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei's response began to turn deadly on Thursday, with security goons firing on a crowd in the southwestern city of Lorgan, killing at least 2. Words of support from Washington are vital now to encourage the protests and make Tehran think twice about a harsher crackdown. UN Ambassador Mike Waltz Not to be confused with Tim Walz, who we'll be talking about later in Minnesota. Very much so, not to be confused. UN Ambassador Mike Waltz spoke out on Monday. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and President Donald Trump should join him now. Don't be like President Barack Obama, who time and again flinched from publicly siding with Iranian protests, hesitating even to denounce Tehran's bloody suppression of them. Obama was busy trying to appease the regime into cooperating with his demented nuclear deal. Team Trump's approach has already proved far more to the point, bombing Iran's nuke program into smithereens. Iran's people have risen up repeatedly these last 15 years against the misrule of the so-called Islamic Republic, with their cries shifting from calls to reform to demands to end the oppression installed by the 1979 revolution. These latest protests entered a fifth day, Thursday, sixth day this morning, still growing all across the nation. The voices crying out for justice now need to hear that Trump is on their side. And their rulers need to know America won't turn an Obama-esque eye, blind eye that is, if they try to another ruthless crackdown, or Thursday's killing will surely be just a taste of the bloodbath to come. So kind of in reference to that, they wrote that yesterday, Trump again saying we are locked and loaded and ready to go. Since we're talking about international issues, and we do have a lot to catch up on. I know we had yesterday off, and I'm sure many people slept in anyway, enjoying New Year's. Let me know, did you make it to midnight? That's always a challenge. But we are going to talk about Minnesota. We've got a lot of New York updates, not just with the swearing in of Zohran Mamdani. Looked like a big crowd. Of course, chants of tax the rich. We know that he was sworn in by Bernie Sanders with a stack. I think I had heard originally 3, but it may have been 2 Qurans. First time in New York City history where a mayor was sworn in on a Quran. We'll be talking about that. But Zelensky said during his New Year's Eve speech, Ukrainian President Zelensky, prayed that peace would no longer elude the nation in the new year, with Russia commemorated by firing more than 200 drones at the war-torn country. Zelensky, who had met with President Trump on Sunday to discuss the latest peace talks, said he was heartbroken that 2025 came and went with the Russian invasion still proceeding. Quote, I will give anything in the world if in this address I could say that peace will also come in just a few minutes. Unfortunately, I cannot say that. But with a clear conscience, all of us can say that Ukraine is truly doing everything for peace. The Ukrainian president said the U.S.-backed peace deal is 90% ready, with Russia's maximalist demands and refusal to make any real concessions remaining the key issue. And then you have the typical Russian response, which we talked about earlier this week, which, of course, is to say, oh, no, Ukraine attacked us. Putin's attacked Putin's home. So now we're going to start the war up all over again. It's so typical of Russia, and specifically Putin. But I'll continue with what Zelensky had to say. Those are the 10% that will determine the fate of peace, the fate of Ukraine and Europe, how people will live. 10% to save millions of lives. 10% of the determination needed for peace to work 100%. 10% of the unity and wisdom so desperately needed. Ukrainian, American, European, for the entire world. 10% to peace. The speech came just after Zelensky concluded a call with Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff. Witkoff writing on X, we focused on how to move the discussion forward in a practical way on behalf of the president's peace process, including strengthening security guarantees and developing effective deconfliction mechanisms. Wow. To help end the war and ensure it does not restart. So there you are. And also, why not? Let's just keep going here. Okay. I'm packing in a lot this morning. You're going to have to buckle up. This is not a 2025 episode of Frankly Speaking. This is a 2026 episode where there's no nonsense. This is out of, let's see, we got that thing over. Venezuela has detained several Americans as tension with the United States rises. The circumstances of the individual cases vary, and some could have been involved in drug smuggling, the official said. U.S. officials are still collecting information about what the Americans were doing in Venezuela at the time of their detention. Trump's administration officials believe the Maduro regime is detaining the Americans to build leverage against the U.S. as a pressure campaign against the Venezuelan leader, including the U.S. strikes on drug boats, a CIA strike on Venezuelan port facilities, and recent oil blockade has intensified in recent months. But on the piggyback of that was about 7 hours ago that we learned several Americans have been detained in Venezuela. We also learned early this morning that Nicolas Maduro, the Venezuelan president, said late last night that his government is open to negotiating an agreement with the United States after months of American military pressure targeting drug trafficking networks tied to his government. In a pre-taped interview with Spanish journalist Romanet that aired on state television, Maduro said Venezuela is ready to discuss a drug trafficking deal with the U.S. He called on the countries to start talking serious with data in hand. Quote, the U.S. government knows, because we've told many of their spokespeople, that if they wanted to seriously discuss an agreement to combat drug trafficking, we are ready. If they want oil, Venezuela is ready for U.S. investment, like with Chevron, whenever they want it, wherever they want it, and however they want it. Chevron Corp is the only major U.S. oil company currently exporting Venezuelan crude to the U.S. Maduro said the U.S. wants a regime change in Venezuela and access to its oil reserves through a months-long pressure campaign that began with a major military deployment to the Caribbean Sea in August. He said it is clear the U.S. wants to impose themselves through threats, intimidation, and force. How's that? There's the international issues you need to know to kick off 2026 here on Frankly Speaking. When we come back, we've talked, I don't know, probably, I'm not going to say the last full year, but probably the last 6 to 8 months, we've had at least once a week, sometimes once a day, articles from various outlets questioning Trump's health. And the reason I mention this is because we get very upset after 4 years of being actually called conspiracy theorists. If we question Biden's health, the media said, oh, nothing to see here. And then, of course, after the debate, their hand was forced. They had to start reporting on it. Jake Tapper, trying to cover their you-know-what, comes out with the book, which admits that people weren't doing their job. Now, to make up for not doing their job, as Jake Tapper said, they're going to do tenfold and look at every little thing that Trump does. So we've had numerous examples of these articles which are blown out of proportion about Trump's health. It's one of those examples of never mind what you're seeing with your eyes. Never mind that he's everywhere. He's the most transparent president. He's in front of the cameras all the time. He's at events all the time. We see him in real time every day, but we're supposed to believe that he has serious health issues. This is, again, it proves that the mainstream media, the legacy media, has lost all credibility, because the American people know and see with their eyes what happened the last 4 years. And it wasn't until that disastrous debate performance by Biden that the media was finally forced to report on it. And now they see this nonstop, almost 24/7 coverage of Trump's health, even though we see him, again, at rallies, at sporting events, in front of the cameras after cabinet meetings or wherever. But we're supposed to believe what the media, who's lacked credibility, who has no credibility, we're supposed to believe what they say and not what we see with our eyes. The reason I mention that is we've got a couple of stories on that, because Trump weighed in on his health and that mysterious bruising. We're going to talk a little bit about the bias there in the media. Then we're going to talk about Minnesota, New York. Did you watch Zohran Mamdani's swearing in? Boy, he did not back down. He is definitely going with the Democrat socialist agenda. And a lot of people are piggybacking off of his socialist platform, thinking that will help them reach Albany, maybe Congress, whatever. I'm going to give you some examples of that. So stay with us. We're just getting warmed up, already running late. So 2026, a lot like 2025. Stay with us. We'll be right back. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam, brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We are back, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. So Trump, I don't like the headline here, but Trump finally explains mysterious bruising. This was yesterday. He said in an interview that his frequent bruising of his hands is due to him taking more aspirin than his doctors recommend, a habit he claims to have engaged in for 25 years because, quote, I'm a little superstitious. And we've heard he's superstitious in the past. Trump also told the Wall Street Journal that he regrets undergoing an advanced imaging scan as part of an October checkup at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center because it gave critics a little ammunition to question his health. I would have been a lot better off if they didn't, because that fact that I took it, they said, oh, gee, is something wrong? Well, nothing's wrong. Again, this, I know, I'm glad he addressed it, but the conspiracy theories are running wild with the bruising on his hand, his ankle issue. White House physician Dr. Sean Barbarella told the Journal that Trump takes a standard dose of 325 milligrams of aspirin per day. Though the president acknowledged his physician would rather have me take the smaller one, I take the larger one. But I've done it for years, and what it does to do is it does cause bruising. The smaller one likely refers to baby aspirin. They say aspirin is good for thinning out the blood, and I don't want thick blood pouring through my heart. I want nice, thin blood pouring through my heart. Does that make sense? It sure does, President Trump. The president also confirmed to the Wall Street Journal that future Attorney General Pam Bondi made his hand bleed when she clipped him with her ring while giving a high five during the Republican National Convention. The ring hit the back of my hand, and yes, there was a little cut. Adding that he uses makeup that's easy to put on, takes about 10 seconds to conceal cuts and bruises. The chatter has always been triggered by instances of the president appearing to doze off during meetings. Well, some of these cabinet meetings go on forever. He said, sometimes they'll take a picture of me blinking, and they'll catch me with the blink, Trump said, of the shut-eye snaps. The official report from Barbarella have described Trump as being in excellent overall health, with the president himself crediting his very good genetics. Let's talk about health again for the 25th time. The Journal quoted an exasperated Trump as saying, "My health is perfect." Dr. Oz said, as a clinician, you look for clues in people, even if they're not your patient. And he is just with it on some fairly complex topics. I can't even think of a single time where he said something where I don't think he understands the issue here. He may want you to do something that is arguably whether it's the right path to go, but it's a very rational approach to it. So we've seen, Carolyn Levitt said yesterday, the president's physician and the White House have always maintained the president received advanced imaging. Additional details on the imaging have been disclosed by the president himself because he continues to be the most transparent and open president in history and has nothing to hide, unlike his predecessor, Joe Biden, who hid from the press and lied about his clear physical and mental decline. It wasn't just him that was lying. It wasn't just Biden that was lying about his mental and physical decline. It was the media. And now they're trying to present themselves as credible. Well, look at all those waves coming in. Credible by attacking Trump at every turn. Listen to this. Mediaite says, Donald Trump slams exercise as boring. So they said, why don't you exercise and you do the fast food? And he says, I just don't like it. It's boring. To walk on a treadmill or run on a treadmill for hours and hours like some people do, that's not for me. But before, I have a little time here. But the Wall Street Journal says, and this is just to show you their lack of credibility, as signs of aging emerge, Trump responds with defiance. Trump, 79, the oldest man to assume the presidency, is showing signs of aging in public and private, according to people close to him. Yeah, he has at times skewed the advice of his doctors and scoffed at the medical community, widely accepted health recommendations, relying instead on what he calls his good genetics. Would you have ever, and I know I don't want to belabor this point, but the last 4 years, would you have heard Biden, the oldest man to assume the presidency, is showing signs of aging in public and private, according to people close to him? You would not. They covered for him at every turn. And now we're supposed to believe their credibility as the mainstream media who has, many call it Trump derangement syndrome. I just say hatred for Trump. We're now supposed to believe their close sources that say he is aging. He is 79 years old. Yes, everybody does age. But to present this as something worse than it is, the most transparent president in history who gets in front of the cameras for us to see on a almost regular daily basis, we're supposed to believe what the Wall Street Journal says, not what our own eyes say. I'm not going to go in, and we already heard about the aspirin and all that. We heard about the skin. I don't want to go through this whole thing, but the bias here is so maddening. And again, it's why the media has no credibility. Is Trump how about this? On CNN, the lead. Now, I want to remind you, and you know this, we've talked about this hatred for Trump in the media and how many times they bring up his health nonstop. We started it as kind of a joke, and then it became overwhelming how many times there was a story presented about his health. Well, on CNN, network medical analyst Jonathan Reiner said he was very concerned the public is not being told anything meaningful about President Trump's health issues. Were you upset? Were you concerned during the Biden administration, Mr. Reiner? I would love to know that. But he said, on CNN's The Lead. Well, I'm honestly concerned that the public really hasn't been told essentially anything meaningful about the president's health here. So let's turn the clock back and look what's gone on over the last 9 months. The president had a physical exam, a comprehensive physical exam in April, Walter Reed. And, they listed, a bunch of studies which were essentially all normal. Essentially all normal. Okay. The president was great. And then there was nothing else to see over the summer. The president developed really, really greatly swollen ankles, which prompted another series of tests. They called the chronic venous insufficiency, despite the fact that just a few months earlier, during his comprehensive exam, the president's physician said he had no swelling of the legs. So it doesn't sound so chronic to me. It sounds more acute. And then something happened in the fall. Something happened in October that prompted an off-cycle series of tests by the president's medical team. And when the results of those were released to the public, they used some basically euphemisms to describe what the tests the president went through. And the euphemism was advanced imaging. And they don't describe whether it was CT or an MRI. And then later on, a few days later on Air Force One, the president basically said he had an MRI, couldn't describe one body part, but he said he had an MRI, which prompted the president's physician again to release another statement, in which time he again did not describe the specific test the president underwent and said that, again, everything looked fine. And now we learned the president didn't have an MRI. He actually had a CT scan, which explains why the president's physician didn't describe the test after the president disclosed his MRI, because he didn't have an MRI. So as best as we could tell, the president had a cardiac CT, or what looks like a CT, which is basically a non-invasive way to tell whether the president has any significant coronary artery disease. I'm almost less concerned about the actual cause of the president's bruising. We could talk about that than I am about why the White House medical team has felt the need to study him in the last few months. What symptoms? What clinical concerns have prompted this? Because the president is right. When you test the president of the United States, it creates a lot of problems. Well, let's be honest. Where was that coverage under Biden? As a matter of fact, we learned that Biden, after he was out of office, actually had cancer. That was not reported. His health was never reported on. And if it was, you were criticized for mentioning it. And now they're going after Pete Hegseth. That's the new line of attack. That you got the health of President Trump. Now it's Pete Hegseth is a diva. Of course, it's always coming from anonymous sources. Just bringing this up to show you the lack of credibility in the media. I hope that you appreciate it. But when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about Pete just quickly, and then we've got to get into Minnesota. I can't run as late as we have been lately because we have so much to cover, because I do want to talk about Zohran Mamdani's swearing-in ceremony. Oh, I couldn't make it. Did you happen to go to, speaking of swearing-in ceremonies, to the one on right here in Corning, where they swore in the new mayor and some other elected leaders, I understand? It sounds like it was a really good crowd, maybe a couple hundred people. I was not able to make it, but if you went, I'd love to hear your thoughts. All right, stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam, brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We are back, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. Some comments from viewers. How can Maduro negotiate for Venezuela? He was voted out and no longer the president. I think he has a different opinion on that, but I know he's an illegitimate president. I agree. I think he's just trying to I don't think he likes the tax. I think he realizes they're in a losing position, so now he's willing to quote-unquote negotiate. Mark writes in, it wasn't just the media covering up Biden's decline, it was also the whole corrupt Democrat Party. Absolutely. How many people like Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi say, oh, he's sharp as a tack? How dare you question him? There's not an issue that we talk about where he doesn't know it from one end to the other, knows it all. And the media ran with that. Think about that. And that was one of the arguments that Jake Tapper made in his book and others made after the debate. That, well, his spokespeople, Biden's spokespeople, said he was doing fine, said he was healthy. When have they ever taken the word of Trump's spokespeople? When have they ever said, oh, this is the press release you've sent us, we'll copy it word for word? Never. But for Biden, they admitted, they said out loud, the secret part, as people say sometimes, they said out loud, oh, well, his spokesperson said he's fine. So as a journalist, aren't you supposed to not just take the spokesperson's word for it? Aren't you supposed to question a little bit further? But of course, the answer was no, because it was a Democrat president, and they need to protect that Democrat president at all costs. Now their talk, of course, is Trump's health, or they're saying that Pete Hegseth is a diva and that he has a short fuse. They have been going after Pete Hegseth is in an interesting position because not only is he in the Trump administration, he also was a Fox News host. Two things the media hate with a passion. So he has gotten maybe a little extra scrutiny. Hegseth appeared to have quickly lost patience for the Ukraine plight in its fight against Russia as he took over leadership at the Pentagon last year. The Secretary of Defense, later renamed War Secretary, seemed to have a disdain for any pro-Ukrainian generals left over from Biden's term, according to the New York Times report. Specifically, sources detail tension between General Christopher Cavoli, who is now retired but was commander of United States European Command from 2022 until his retirement in July of 2025. One official said it remains unclear whether Hegseth didn't like Ukraine or just didn't like Cavoli. Anyway, so prickly Pete Hegseth's short fuse laid bare as insiders reveal war on words. He wanted less and more snappy briefings. Hegseth was annoyed. So he snaps. Okay. All right. Then we learn that he is a diva, according to the far-left Daily Beast. Hegseth reportedly powdered his nose with his personal supply of makeup ahead of a meeting with world leaders because he was aware that Trump might be watching. Hegseth quit his role as Fox News host after Trump nominated him to lead the Pentagon in November. A new investigation by the New York Times examines the early days of Hegseth's career at the DoD, including his swearing in and his crash course on European politics. Trump had said he could end Russia's war in Ukraine on day one of his second term as president, putting pressure on his new and untested appointee. A former Pentagon official told the New York Times that Hegseth didn't have any of his own thoughts on Russia and Ukraine, but he had civilian advisors who did. A former Pentagon official. So New York Times finding a lot of anonymous sources to try to put down Pete Hegseth. Hegseth, who was aware that his handshake with, who is this from, Ukraine's defense minister, may be shown on Fox News and that Trump would be watching. And so he wanted to look commanding. As a former TV host, Hegseth is no stranger for being touched up for the camera. Anyway, why am I reading all this? But that is the new line, so now they're going after Hegseth yet again. But enough on that. Okay. Oh, before we take a break, because we're going to get into Minnesota, I'm asking you if you watched Zohran Mamdani's swearing in. He's going to be a socialist. There's no denying it. It's going to be bad times for New York City. Probably bad times for all of New York. Governor Hochul, there was the no tax on tips was in limbo. Now, not at the federal level, but it looked like New York would still charge the taxes. Hochul's kind of backtracking on that because it is an election year. Most likely safe for Bruce Blakeman, her challenger. And the reason I mentioned that is if you are in the Hornell area, tomorrow and Sunday at 1 o'clock, I am honored to be on the first 2026, the first edition of the Pulse in 2026 with the mayor, John Buckley. He's going to have me on Saturday and Sunday at 1 o'clock on WLEA. And what we're going to talk about? Bruce Blakeman. So don't miss it. There's no kid glove treatment, the term we've been using over and over this morning, about that decision by Blakeman. We also talk about Stefanik. We also give President Trump kind of a report card on some issues, some pros, some cons, some things that were great, some things you'd like to see differently. So again, Hornell Mayor John Buckley, good friend of Frankly Speaking, honored to be on his program, The Pulse, on WLEA on Saturday or Sunday. Or you can watch it both, Saturday and Sunday at 1 o'clock. Watch it both. Listen to them both on Saturday or Sunday at 1 o'clock. So let me know if you are able to listen and what you think. I think we did a good job. All right, we got to take a short break. When we come back, keep those comments coming in, keep those waves coming in. I know people are still in their holiday, if you will, their holiday schedule, which is a little bit different, but we've been getting a lot of great comments and a lot of great waves the last few days, so I do appreciate it. It's good to be with you here in the year 2026. Hard to believe how quickly 2025 went. Hard to believe that President Trump, keep this in mind, President Trump has still not been president for even a year, and how much has been accomplished and how much has happened in that year. Of course, he was sworn in on January 20th, so just a couple weeks shy of 1 year. Hard to believe when you look back at it. And I talked about this with Mayor Buckley. Just how much, just the little things you forget that happened early on, like the Gulf of America and these type of things. Just fascinating. But when we come back, Minnesota. So stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam, brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We are back, broadcasting live from the Hesselson's studio. So journalist Nick Shirley, who the media, and I'm going to give you some examples of this. We talked about it last week, or early this week. They're trying to discredit Nick Shirley. They're not trying to talk about the actual scandal in Minnesota and the waste of taxpayer money. They want to deflect by going after Mr. Shirley. It's an old Democrat and media playbook. They've done it forever. They did it with James O'Keefe, with the Acorn. You recall all of that. Well, Nick Shirley says he has now received death threats and harassment, including phone calls to his family after releasing that viral video. Imagine being outraged where you want to threaten someone's life because they are exposing taxpayer waste. Now, if it's one of the people benefiting off of that, perhaps that's a different story. Maybe that's who it is, one of these daycare workers. I don't know. But Shirley described the threats during an appearance on a podcast, and he said he was warned, get this, he said he was warned he would be kirked, a reference to the assassination of Charlie Kirk. So you would be kirked. The backlash against Shirley and his investigation happened soon after it went viral. Shirley claimed the centers appeared largely empty. We know all about that. One location allegedly collected roughly $4 million. It goes on and on. What Shirley further claimed on the podcast is since his video went viral, he has received threats both in person and online. They're saying like kirked. You're going to be kirked. You're going to be kirked, Shirley told the host. That's what they're saying. Like, you're next. You'll be the next Charlie Kirk. Shirley appeared shaken as he described the toll of the threats had taken, particularly the calls received by his family. And it's just like, are you kidding me? It's not even like I hate what's happening right now. I honestly feel bad for my family because it's like, yeah, we didn't do anything wrong, and yet you guys are coming after me like I'm some sort of villain. So I'm like, my little sister's getting phone calls. I'm like, why are you guys doing this? I didn't make this a right or left issue, he said. I just showed you guys the fraud that is happening. As previously reported, Minnesota officials have pushed back on Shirley's video, but boy, they have handled that horribly. Did you see the one daycare came out? I want to say it was New Year's Eve, came out and said, oh, you're never going to believe it. All of our important files about all the kids that we've been watching all these years, gone. Someone came in and stole them. Because I know a lot of crooks like to steal paperwork from a daycare center. It's common theft. So we'll talk about that in a second. But good for Nick Shirley because he pushed back at the CBS reporter because, again, they're trying to discredit him. He told the CBS reporter to quit yapping on selfie mode and visit a daycare center himself after the news outlet claimed there is no evidence of daycare fraud. Yeah, that is the new talking point because they're trying to bury it. Keep in mind, and I mentioned this on our last show together, CNN had to really go in depth on their piece because they had not reported to their viewers what this was even about from the beginning. So when it finally broke that Trump was going to withdraw funds from Minnesota daycare programs, they had to report on it. So then they had to write about an 11-page piece about what it really was and what's happening with their viewers. That piece, of course, was focused on discrediting Mr. Shirley, basically saying nothing to see here, and CBS even saying there's no evidence of daycare fraud in Minnesota. What is it about the left? I know they like higher taxes. The wasting of taxpayer money is not a problem to them. But to see this level of fraud and not want to report on it, it's pretty pathetic that it takes a citizen journalist to do the job that all of the mainstream media wouldn't or refused to do. Again, I know I keep quoting it, but J.D. Vance saying that Mr. Shirley did more great work in journalism than any Pulitzer Prize winner in 2025. CBS News conducted its own analysis, clearing the daycare centers of any fraud outside of safety and cleanliness standards. Quote, a recent video by conservative YouTuber Nick Shirley alleged nearly a dozen daycare centers in Minnesota that are receiving public funds are not actually providing any service. After the video went viral, DHS Secretary Kristi Noem announced a massive investigation on childcare and other rampant fraud. In the state, CBS News conducted its own analysis of nearly a dozen daycare centers mentioned by Shirley. All but two have active licenses, according to state records, and all active locations were visited by state regulators within the last 6 months. CBS News Review also found dozens of citations related to safety, cleanliness, equipment, and staff training, among other violations, but there's no recorded evidence of fraud. Well, that's okay. So CBS is just taking The health department or whatever that would be that reviews the daycare center, just taking them at their word. Could we see the documents of how many times they visited? We visited those sites too, as did state inspectors many times over the last 6 months, and we found the facts on the ground tell a different story, said CBS reporter Jonathan Kaplan. Those daycares, many of them were written up for safety violations. Things may have busted equipment or staff training issues. That's not the same as being fraudulent. So it's important to put all this into context. So Shirley fired back and said, why don't you go to a daycare yourself and you will see it firsthand? Or you can just keep yapping on selfie mode. Well, the thing is, we saw what happened, especially if they know there's an investigation about that take place or an inspection about to take place. They're busing in these kids. There's video in the past of parents getting kickbacks. So they bust in the kids and make it look busy. That one, the learning or Leering Center, where the learning was spelled wrong, the neighbors saying that they thought it was closed, out of business. They'd never seen any vehicles there. And then, of course, the day after the video goes viral, the parking lot's full. There's kids everywhere. Neighbors are shocked. We've got a couple more things on this. Oh, no, I've got a little time here. I had mentioned CNN and their despicable coverage of this. CNN, of course, going after Shirley and not against the fraud. CNN was roasted online by everyone from Senator Ted Cruz and prominent conservative pundits to average Americans for a segment that questioned viral reporting of Nick Shirley. Again, James O'Keefe went through this as well. They don't want to talk about the waste, the fraud, the corruption. What they want to talk about is the way Mr. Shirley edited or the way he got his information. They want to discredit him. Shirley went viral. You know all about that. CNN correspondent Whitney Wild interviewed Shirley in a segment featured on Anderson Cooper 360. During which Wild questioned Shirley's method of investigating the centers. Well, this is also the ego of the media, because there's no way a citizen journalist could do it as good as us. Yeah, I know you can say, well, the media is discredited so often, so many things, they have to kind of put a disclaimer on that they made a mistake over and over. But no, they're the best, and they are the only ones that know how to do this business, not a citizen journalist. After peppering Shirley with questions, the CNN reporter said the network is looking into his claims. Wild was then shown calling Minnesota daycare centers via speakerphone, acknowledging many of the centers Shirley visited did not pick up her calls. Only one daycare facility answered and said they are a legitimate business. Well, that's good. Thank you for your hard work in journalism. Thank you for doing the work that no one else would do. They said they're legitimate. Everything's fine. Needless to say, it was panned online that because CNN was spending more time investigating Nick Shirley than the fraud in Minneapolis. Well, again, Shirley did the job that these reporters should have been doing. Laura Ingram wrote, "No one on earth is surprised that CNN appears to side with Somali fraudsters." She's exactly right. The popular account Libs of TikTok wrote, CNN disputes that there's fraud in Minnesota Somali daycares because they called a bunch of daycares. One answered, so they asked if they were committing fraud, and the daycare responded that they're not. I'm not kidding. Miranda Devine, who we quote a lot here on the program from the New York Post, said, "What an embarrassment, CNN. She interviews Nick Shirley in person, but not the daycare center. And then she takes the word of the one daycare center she contacts by phone, but does not visit, that they are legit. Seriously." While Shirley himself called the CNN report a hit piece, many were in disbelief that a news network would try to discredit his reporting. Quote, so CNN's angle here is to try and discredit Nick Shirley while patting authorities for pursuing fraud on the back. But hilariously, 2 minutes in, the network buries the lead. We reached out to several of the daycares featured in the now viral video. Only one daycare facility answered and said they are a legitimate business. Just take that one person's word for it. Journalist Benjamin Weingarten responded. CNN has not responded to a request for comment, but that's what they're going to do because they didn't want to report on this in the first place. Many did not report on this in the first place. You could only really get it on conservative outlets. It was only when Trump said that he was going to withdraw that funding that they finally had to report on it, and then they had to go back in and because they don't want to report on fraud. They want the big government. They want the era of Zohran Mamdani, who promises more big government. They don't want the big government exposed for its waste and fraud and corruption because it shines a bad light on big government, and that's their dream. The bigger the government, the better. So instead, as we said, they have to try to destroy Mr. Shirley. But we got to take a short break, a little bit more on this, and then we've got to talk about. We got a couple breaking stories too that we'll get to. that are just worth mentioning. Then we're going to talk about New York State issues. So stay with us. We will be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We are back broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Marcus Street in Corning. A couple of viewer comments. Mark writes in, Shirley is probably being threatened because Trump shut down all the funding for daycares in Minnesota until they verify they are legit. So parents are probably steaming about it, meaning the legitimate daycares. Yes, that could very well be the case. But I think a lot of it, too, is that people just do not like when big government is exposed. I mean, because they look at this as a right-left issue, which I would think saving taxpayer money wouldn't be a right-left issue. But many of them apparently do because of the calls for Walz to resign. They have made it a political issue. And I think a lot of the threats are more from the political side of things. If I'm being honest, Mark, I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you, but I think it was probably more because there's a political connotation there. Okay, Jack says, I listened to an interview of Marjorie Taylor Greene explaining the reasons she is leaving. She opened with over 770 prosecuted death threats recorded by Capitol Police. She then talked about getting swatted at her home after she put forth her bill on the trans of children issue. She said there are people in prison right now for threatening her life, pleading guilty for it. She also doesn't like that she spent millions of dollars of her own money flying around the country supporting Trump, and after he fought to get Epstein files released for the female, after she fought to get the Epstein files released for the female victims, within weeks Trump brings into his office Al-Qaeda or ISIS terrorists, the new president of Syria, and saying that a great man he is, even spraying him with Trump cologne, then brings in the Crown Prince. Also, she's upset that he went out of his way to support the New York City mayor. That's most of the interview's message. I still think with Marjorie Taylor Greene, and I don't want to get too much into it, though, I do think she has now found that niche that she's been looking for because, let's face it, when she was very, very pro-Trump, she was getting a lot of attention. It was negative attention from the media, but she still liked the attention. I think now when she can attack Trump and attack, some of his positions, which, maybe you can find some of those legitimate, but now she gets more positive likes. She gets more positive attention from the media, and I think she likes that. I wasn't happy, I'll say, with that, his embracing of Zohran Mamdani, because I think that was another kind of a nail in the coffin for Stefanik's campaign for governor, because that was her major message, was that Zohran is a socialist and Hochul endorsed him. So I'm not sure. I think that goes back to why I think Stefanik is just jaded by politics. I don't think, whatever you want to say about this, I think Trump not endorsing her and him embracing Zohran really cost us the governor's race in many ways here in New York State. It cost us any potential chance of beating Hochul because it led to Blakeman's rise. Unfortunately, Blakeman being rewarded for kind of being the fly in the ointment and costing us Stefanik. So that's what it sounds like to me. Could be many other issues. Just like she said, it was about family. But I think there is something there that just caused her to be kind of over it, if you will. Back to Minnesota for just a moment. Police in Minneapolis have disputed a Somali-run daycare center claim that important documents disproving fraudulent activity was stolen. Shouldn't this be something that CNN's reporting on, that the other outlets, CBS? You actually had a daycare center give a press conference. They had received plenty of government funding, saying you're not going to believe it. Important documents, specifically how many kids we've watched through the years, stolen. But the police in Minneapolis saying, that's not the case. The Nokomis Daycare Center claimed that a burglar broke into the building through the kitchen in the rear of the facility on Tuesday, rummaging through the main office and stealing documents pertaining to its operation. What's the chances? But police say that no report was filed, per the New York Post. Nasrullah Mohammed, manager of Nokomis Daycare Center, told reporters that a suspect entered through the kitchen at the rear of the facility, damaging a wall and breaking into the building's office sometime on Tuesday. He said the alleged prowler stole important documentation, including children's enrollment information, employee documentation, and checkbooks. How convenient. Is that something that you would, as a burglar, was that what you're going to go for? Important documents at a daycare facility. However, no loss was reported to officers, according to a preliminary report by the Minneapolis Police Department. The Nokomis Daycare Center provided a video of a hole in the wall that may have been a utility closet. Mohammed claimed that the burglary may have arisen from the recent viral video. Yeah, it's probably Nick Shirley's fault. This is devastating news, and we don't know why this is targeting our Somali community, as one video made by a specific individual made this all happen. Mohammed added that the center has received hateful and threatening messages since the Shirley report. This is frightening and exhausting. So it's Shirley's fault. It's some type of anti-Somali mindset. That's something the media is trying to portray this as, not as saving taxpayers' money and ending fraud, that there's some aspect of racism there. They're trying to push that as well. But what's the chances that you run a daycare and, by golly, they steal all the important documents to show whether or not you actually had kids at your daycare center? Boy, that's tough luck. That is tough luck. Even though the police saying that's not the case, but that's their argument. We got to take our last break of this hour. Stay with us. Frankly Speaking Roof Cam, brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We are back, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio on Market Street in Corning. So I already heard about the horrible bad luck. I guess it's a good way to end 2025 and not enter into 2026 with that kind of bad luck, where the daycare center had someone break in and steal all of their important documents. Then at a different daycare center, they were giving kind of a speech. A Minnesota mother speaking out against the Trump administration freezing of child care funding. She abruptly cut off her remarks shortly after admitting that, quote, fraud is bad. Decor Noor, a medical student whose 4-year-old attends a daycare center outside Minneapolis, told reporters at a New Year's Eve press conference that her child would be one of more than 20,000 losing access to the facilities without federal help. Quote, I rely on child care. I work. If child care is cut, I am unable to work or go to school. I understand fraud is bad. Then she cut it off and said, I can't do this, and placed her hand on her mouth while inhaling sharply. She then looked up, apparently flustered, and told the other attendees at the news conference, I don't think I can speak. Elsewhere in the press conference, Maria Snyder, vice president of the Minnesota Child Care Association, blurted out there is fraud before placing her hands to her mouth in exasperation, so that she had also uttered the phrase. What? What is going on? Keith Ellison, the Minnesota Attorney General, helped stage the news conference where it was admitted that fraud is going on. Again, the media is not going to cover this. And Ken had mentioned it earlier this week. The focus is either going to be, like I had mentioned, going to be attack Shirley, or like Ken mentioned, it's going to be Trump cutting the daycare of those children in need and those mothers in need, and they're going to paint Trump as the bad guy. Not that we need to get to the bottom of this fraud and corruption, because they don't even want to report on that. Do they? Not at all, of course. All right, that's it for hour number one. A couple little quick things on Minnesota when we come back, and then we're getting into New York State issues. Boy, where did hour number one go of the 2026 edition of Frankly Speaking? Stay with us. We will be right back. And welcome to hour number two of Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. Thank you so much for joining us. Comment from a viewer. Oh, the irony with the daycare. This is so lame. It is to say that your important documents were stolen just in time, just a few days after that viral video where they knew that they would have to start defending themselves, and rightfully so. Comment, good morning, Frank. Well, good morning. Yes, with a freezing cold emoji, that is for sure. Happy New Year to you, staff, sponsors, and viewers. Well, thank you. The same goes for you. Happy New Year to you. And we always thank our staff here at Big Fox and our great, amazing sponsors like Hesselson's, you see on the bottom of the screen, Culligan's Water, so many others. So thank you to our sponsors. And, of course, Happy New Year to all of you as well. So thank you for that nice comment. All right. The Minnesota daycare scandal has been years in the making. We know that. An audit released nearly a decade before the Trump administration targeted the area. It revealed that nearly 1/5 of all taxpayer money meant for child care centers in the state, roughly $16 million, was being misappropriated. That was back in July of 2016. So this is nothing. I'm sorry, 2012. So nothing new under the sun. Now, President Donald Trump has vowed to fix the fraud problem. He vowed to get to the bottom of the alleged fraud while speaking during his New Year's Eve party on Wednesday. The president told the crowd how much those involved allegedly stole. Can you imagine they stole $18 billion? That's just what we're learning about. That's peanuts. And California is worse, Illinois is worse, and sadly, New York is worse. We're going to get to the bottom of all of those. It was a giant scam. Yeah, and we've talked about it on the program. There's no doubt this is happening in New York as well. It's not just relegated to Minnesota. The president's remark, we know all about the story. I don't have to go through all of that. Now, as a result of the investigation report on the issues, Trump's Department of Health and Human Services is freezing federal payments to child care businesses in Minnesota. The Minnesota freeze is also intended to pressure other states to check for fraud in their federally funded services, especially within the ethnic enclaves created by long-standing federal policy of mass migration. The freeze is politically powerful because it will force the state's legitimate operators to demand state investigations into the apparently massive fraud by Somali operators. The fraud is evidently hidden by the imported, self-serving Somali culture of amoral familialism, which is very different from the U.S.-style citizenship, which emphasizes reciprocal rights and duties in a shared society. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz has since accused Trump of politicizing the issue of the alleged Somali immigrant fraud, claiming we've spent years cracking down on fraudsters. Trump then criticized Walz as a crooked governor. Even the Washington Post is calling for stricter SNAP qualifications after this fraud in Minnesota. The Washington Post editorial board called on the Trump administration to press for meaningful reform of the country's entitlement program, specifically SNAP, Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Programs. In an editorial, the outlet said Nick Shirley's investigation led to Minnesota's Somali fraud scandal, finally piercing the national consciousness. Quote, as America's welfare system or welfare state has ballooned to more than 80 major federal programs, they become a target-rich environment for alleged scam artists like those in Minneapolis. Walz' boondoggle underlines the need for serious reforms across America. Too bad that too many progressive leaders are lackadaisical at best about cracking down on fraud and errors, lest it curtail social services. The editorial board contends that this nonchalant attitude towards cracking down on fraud is especially true when it comes to open-ended entitlement programs such as SNAP. Several Democratic states have sued to block the Trump administration's effort to root out waste and fraud by threatening to cut off SNAP funding to states that refuse to share recipient data, including immigration status. The outlet added that it's still unclear whether the Trump administration could legally cut off the funding, adding that blue states won a preliminary injunction in October that temporarily blocked the request. The truth is that SNAP doesn't just help the hungry, the Post said. It had the fourth highest rate of documented fraud across all federal programs from 2018 to 2022, coming in at $10.5 billion. As noted by the Post, Democrat Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey criticized the administration's approach, saying President Trump is playing politics with the ability of working parents with children, seniors, and people with disabilities to get food. So the Washington Post calling for a stricter SNAP qualification setting. Republicans are demanding accountability over this fraud. A Florida lawmaker is now calling for aggressive federal action, comparing this fraud to organized crime. Because really, if you think about it at face value, it is very much like organized crime. We saw the videos in the past where parents are getting basically take their kids in, take their money, take the kids out. We saw it with the Leering Center, where the place where the Learning Center was misspelled. They busted kids to make it look like it was an active daycare, though neighbors saying they've never seen that kind of activity there before. Representative Mike Herodopoulos said, this is what the mafia does. They steal, they lie, they cheat. The federal government has to use the full powers that we used to destroy the mafia back in the 60s. Nothing short of it. Hardopoulos accused Minnesota leaders and state authorities of failing to take the allegations seriously, saying the fraud undercuts the fabric of America. Jason Chaffetz, the former House Oversight Committee chairman, echoed those claims, demanding Minnesota officials testify before Congress on how the alleged fraud went undetected. They need to explain this to the American people and the people of Minnesota. I don't think this is just Minnesota. I think this is going to New York, Illinois, California. Your usual suspects are going to be right there on the list, said Jason Chaffetz. As I mentioned, Trump said that he is going to crack down. He is going to end this. Carolyn Leavitt, White House press secretary, of course, said that people will be in handcuffs as the fallout grows from this fraud, President Trump is not going to let Governor Walz off the hook. Leavitt said the Trump administration had surged federal resources into Minnesota, with multiple agencies conducting investigations tied to the alleged fraud. Among them, ICE is conducting door-to-door operations at alleged fraud sites, a key federal effort ICE Director Todd Lyons discussed on Fox News Channel. This is a top priority for the administration. The Department of Justice, as we speak, is continuing to execute search warrants and subpoenas. The Department of Homeland Security is conducting door-to-door investigations on the ground at potential fraud sites, and they're also conducting continued deportation of illegal aliens in Minnesota communities. We're also not afraid to use denaturalization. That's a tool at the President and the Secretary of State's disposal, and it's one this administration had previously used before. The Health and Human Services, Agriculture, and Labor Department are also involved, with one cutting off child care funding in Minnesota until the investigation is fully explored. So again, Carolyn Leavitt saying her entire administration is working around the clock to get to the bottom of this, and that people will leave in handcuffs. Okay. If you are just joining us, I mentioned this in the 6 o'clock hour. President Trump, this happened early this morning, and top Iranian security officials exchanged kind of dueling threats early this morning. Because of those wide-ranging protests that have taken over Iran, the people in the street protesting the Iranian regime, Trump wrote that if Iran violently kills peaceful protesters, the United States will come to their rescue. We are locked and loaded and ready to go. So that is the breaking story this morning. We've got some other things we need to get to. I see some comments coming in. Keep those comments coming in. By the way, and I think this goes without saying, Chief Justice, we're going to talk about New York State issues in a moment. Chief Justice Roberts asserted, and you may have missed this was on Wednesday, so a few days ago. He said that the U.S. Constitution is as strong as ever as the nation awaits their decisions in 2026. In his annual end-of-the-year message, Roberts avoided reference to current events and the many legal challenges Trump has faced implementing his second-term agenda. In the new year, Americans should turn the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution for solace and consolation, knowing that those two great charters of freedom and justice remain firm and unshaken, Roberts said. True then and true now, because it was a reference to Calvin Coolidge quote. The Chief Justice message comes as Democrats have routinely pointed to Trump administration moves over the last 12 months, from DOJ to James Comey, to argue the nation is in the midst of a constitutional crisis. Roberts didn't directly address concerns about the independence of the judiciary, but praised the Constitution for granting life tenure and salary protection to safeguard the independence of federal judges and ensure their ability to serve as a counter-majoritarian check on the political branches. This arrangement, now in place for 236 years, has served the country well. It's hard to believe that Roberts has been on the bench for 20 years. Isn't that hard to believe? He also called on judges to continue to decide the cases before us according to our oath, doing equal right to the poor and to the rich, and performing all of our duties faithfully and impartially under the Constitution and laws of the United States. So there you are. I think it goes without saying. A couple of other stories we'll get to here in a moment. Again, I just wanted to remind you, if you are in Hornell, please give us a listen. I'm going to be on with the mayor, John Buckley, on The Pulse. That's his program on WLEA this Saturday at 1 and Sunday at 1. We're going to talk Bruce Blakeman, Elise Stefanik, and we're also going to give a report card on President Trump, see how he's doing in his little under first year of his second term. So if you do get a chance to catch it, please let me know. I'd love to hear what you think. You can also go to WLEA's website and find the past episodes of The Pulse. If you've ever missed them, I think I've been on about once a month. It's an honor to be on the first 2026 Pulse. So I do appreciate that. So I hope that you'll tune in. Stay with us. We got to take a short break. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam, brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We are back. And my apologies, I'm not sure what happened there, why all my spots didn't play. So I do apologize that went right to a black screen. No problem. We're on it. I don't know how successful we'll be, but we are definitely on it. Okay, some comments from viewers. What did I do with that? I was kind of running around here. It is easy to blame Minnesota Somali immigrants for this fraud, but the fact that it is the fundamental business model of the Democratic Party, laundering public money through fraudulent activities in exchange for votes and campaign donations. Progressive leaders are not lackadaisical about enforcement. They are co-conspirators. Interesting point. We know that there's shown a lot of donations being made to certain politicians. You're exactly right. There's also the question about how, and I'm not saying it's in reference to the daycare scandal, but there's also an investigation being done now about how Representative Ilhan Omar went from being essentially broke to now having $30 million in the bank since she's become representative, and that happened in 1 year. So there's questions there too. Yes, I was aware of the blank screen. I'm not sure why that happened, but I do appreciate it. Ken writes in, obviously you saw that Mamdani was sworn in as mayor of New York with his hand on the Quran, but by a senator from Vermont. What's next? The president being sworn in with his hand on the atheist Bible by the president of Venezuela? Yeah, I thought it was really weird that he was being sworn in by Bernie Sanders. He was introduced by AOC. He made it very clear, we're going to talk about it in a second, made it very, very clear that he is a tried and true socialist and will be governing as such. Again, I don't think it's a surprise. That's what we predicted. That's what we were concerned about. And the crowds are not necessarily happy with some of the event. We're happy with this new era of socialism. It's scary. We're going to talk about it here in just a few moments, but I want to just wrap up. Or not wrap up. I want to talk about one thing before that, and then we'll talk about Mamdani and New York. I'm just looking at my... Make sure the next spot plays. Sorry, I'm doing a little multitasking here. Not very professional, but necessary nonetheless. Okay, so great news coming out from Elon Musk. It has been confirmed, or at least he signaled that he will be supporting the GOP in 2026. America is toast if the radical left wins, Musk wrote. They will open the floodgates to illegal immigration and fraud. Won't be America anymore. This was made in response to a conservative influencer claiming Musk is going all in, funding Republicans to help President Trump take back control of the November midterms. The world's richest man has reportedly already made significant contributions to Republicans in 2026 congressional races, according to Axios. The size of Musk's recent donations won't be known publicly until campaign finances are released later this month. So that's good news when it comes to the midterm. All right, let's get to New York State issues. Governor Hochul has proposed, because it is an election year, she has proposed no New York State tax on tips after the major backlash. New Yorkers may finally see relief from taxes on tip, with Governor Hochul saying she'll propose enacting the policy this year after garnering backlash. See, originally it was a story that it looked like it was in limbo in New York. Yes, you would get the cuts at federal level because of Trump's big, beautiful bill, but it looked like New York wasn't going to play along. Well, she saw the pushback. So in a statement released yesterday morning, Hochul said she'd seek to eliminate state income taxes on up to $25,000 in tipped earnings, following through on President Trump's initiative to eliminate federal taxes on tip. Quote, I'm kicking the new year off with a proposal of no state income tax on tips, continuing my efforts to make New York more affordable for hardworking New Yorkers, till she has to enact some of these Mamdani, because there's nothing keeping her back. Whatever you want to say about Blakeman, there's nothing keeping her back from going to the far left and trying to woo the DSA voters, to woo Mamdani supporters. The elimination of gratuity taxes will be included in Hochul's state budget proposal to be released later this month, dropping taxes on tips earned in 2026. Republicans have whacked blue states like New York, Illinois, and California for not moving to make sure state income taxes were also eliminated starting this year. Bruce Blakeman, who is running down seat Hochul and was among those knocking her for being slow to act, cheered the move and said he'd be happy to provide the governor with tips for his own tax-free. I see Kathy Hochul is doing a U-turn on taxing tips. I was told she changed her mind after I said I would never tax tips. Kathy, if you want more of my tips on how to govern, just continue to follow my lead. All right. Also, and this I don't think will come as a surprise to too many, but the race for governor, Governor Hochul is rated solid to beat Bruce Blakeman. Let's take a look at this. If I can get that in order. There we go. Governor Hochul already was leading potential election opponents in both parties by double digits in early polls and seen as likely to win re-election in a pundit forecast for 2026. Then, Stefanik ended her campaign, leaving Bruce Blakeman as the sole Republican contender, a lesser-known candidate without Stefanik's national fundraising power. And a day later, the nonpartisan Cook Political Report shifted its rating for New York's next governor race to solid D from a likely D. So it was originally the likely D, and as we've said, it's an uphill battle. We knew that in New York, but we were excited for the first time. We had a candidate that so many people were excited about, meaning Stefanik, that had name recognition, that could fundraise. And what happened when she was still in the race? It was solid D, a likely D, but not guaranteed. Now it is back to solid Democrat. Coming on the heels of Stefanik's departure, that many have looked like a judgment that Blakeman would be a weaker GOP standard bearer than Stefanik. But in actuality, the rating shift was triggered by the political currents already flowing in Democrat candidates' favor. Well, they can say that, but Bruce Blakeman is not as strong of a candidate as Elise Stefanik. That's simply the fact. He may be in his bubble in Nassau County, which they love to say, well, Nassau County did this, Nassau County is very focused on themselves. That's fine. But the fact that he even admitted that he has to go to upstate to tell people more about himself is pretty troubling, because he should be spending that time winning over voters like in the city and elsewhere, like Stefanik. Stefanik would have spent time in our area, but not as much as past gubernatorial candidates, because she would have had upstate easily and overwhelmingly. She had to focus on areas where she needed to woo voters, if you will. Blakeman, on the other hand, pretty much set up for a loss. But since I've seen some confusion about this change, New York governor was due to a shift to solid D, because at this point it's fair to say that no Republican has a shot in this environment. We don't think Stefanik would have been more competitive here. The race is just simply not in play. Wow, that sounds like an unbiased report by Cook Political Report. No, it's just, Democrats, it's all over but the shouting. Democrats are going to win everything in every state across the board at the midterms. Unbelievable. That's enough of that. Also, since we're talking about New York, I got to take a break. All right, let's see if this break goes a little bit better. Like I said, just a little technical difficulty. I think it had something to do with, you don't need to know. Just some technical stuff behind the scenes. But let's see. Here we go. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking after this. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam, brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We are back, broadcasting live from the Hesselson's studio. Comment from a viewer: can anyone explain to me why President Trump didn't endorse Stefanik from the beginning and instead was neutral and obviously leaning to Blakeman? I just have been confused about this. Great question. So I guess Blakeman and Trump have been friends for a long time, and like actual chummy friends. I don't know. I don't have an answer for you, but it seemed as if because they were both considered friends, he didn't want to weigh in on it. Though we learned later from anonymous sources, so take it with a grain of salt, that he was trying to get Blakeman to drop out because he knew that Stefanik was a better candidate, and that he had told Stefanik's camp that he would endorse closer to the primary. I think the damage had been done at that point. I think Stefanik, this is just me speculating, Stefanik saw, you know what? If you didn't come out and endorse me right away to knock Blakeman out, and you embrace Zohran Mamdani, I'm over politics, essentially. And it's a gigantic loss for the Republican Party. Not only, listen, if she would have said, okay, I'm not running for governor, we could all have said, that stinks. I get it, though. It's an uphill battle, even for Stefanik. But at least she would run for Congress. No, she's not running for re-election to Congress either. She was in a leadership position, huge fundraiser, and that's why she would have made such a great gubernatorial candidate, because she knows how to fundraise. She has that name recognition. Blakeman does not have that name recognition. The only reason we know Bruce Blakeman is because for the last, 3-4 months, not even that, the last couple of months, we've been kind of putting him down for entering in the race. Mayor Buckley and I were talking about this because I'm going to be on the Pulse, as I mentioned, on WLEA this Saturday and Sunday at 1. And we're talking about it. Just that race in general, whether it's a kind of an ego trip or what it was. But sadly, I think we lost our best chance at winning the governor's mansion that we've had in generations. And I just don't see us having another opportunity like this, and it's all because, and I was asked point blank, and I don't like to do this, but do you think Republicans will support Blakeman? That they'll come out and say, well, he's our guy, let's do it? My honest answer is no. I think you'll have people going through the motions. I think you'll have people put the Blakeman sign up in their yard and just be prepared for that, for a governor's race to be declared the minute after the polls close. I don't see people putting the effort into it. They would have put the effort into Stefanik. I truly believe that. I know that. We saw the comments from viewers. I absolutely think that you would have had a lot of support for Stefanik and people honored and proud to go out and work for her. You're not going to have that. And I think you're going to see a lot of disenfranchised Republican voters saying, I'm not even going to bother to go out and vote. And I hate to say that. Or I've heard rumors that, and I think it's a bad idea. If you're going to vote, don't vote for the third party. But I've heard that Larry Sharp, who has run, I think, every gubernatorial primary or election, in the last couple of years, to kind of be, the fly in the ointment for Republicans, costing many people saying that it could have cost, I think it was Astorino at the time, the race. I think you'll have a lot of people maybe going that direction because he's more of a libertarian. I just don't. I don't see any chance. Okay, he wins Nassau County. He's not gonna get the numbers that he should in upstate. He's self-avowed pro-abortion. Is that going to play well in upstate with the conservative Republicans? I don't think so. So again, we lost our best chance. I just don't see people getting excited to be around him, be behind him, I should say. And I know this is going to be awkward because I may end up interviewing him, and I'll have to be friendly, and he's still the Republican running for governor. But it's disconcerting. It's very upsetting. And I wish Stefanik all the best. And I know she'll have a bright future, but it stinks to lose her to probably the private sector when we could have had her as a strong Republican leader for years to come, someone who could have won as governor, someone who someday could have been talked about to be vice president or president, depending on who the candidate was. So she loses UN ambassador. Trump doesn't necessarily background that, puts her back in the House, and now this. It is discouraging. I'm not sugarcoating it for you. If you want me to sugarcoat it, I can, but it does make you kind of your blood boil a little bit when you think about how it played out. Now, again, behind the scenes, it is said that Trump was trying to convince Blakeman to drop out, but Blakeman's ego would not let him. Kind of a Nassau County mindset sometimes when it comes to those candidates. He wouldn't do it, and really he was rewarded for that. He was rewarded by being the spoiler, and now he is a lone man running, and I think that's not going to play well with Republicans. I'm sorry to go on that tangent, but it's very frustrating, and I appreciate that viewer's comment, because I don't know why Trump didn't come right out and say, sorry, Blakeman, we're buddies, but Stefanik is my pick and has been from the beginning. So the fact that he didn't, I think, was just a little bit too much for Stefanik. Now, I don't talk to Stefanik, but that's just, I guess if I'm putting myself in her shoes, that would be my mindset. All right, Mamdani laying out his agenda of affordability and abundance on his first day in office. Can I ask, I know they say it's affordability, and so many Democrats are pointing towards him as kind of the bellwether, that this is how we have to run our campaign so we can win in the midterms. How is giving away money from the government, taxpayers' dollars, make things affordable? I'm confused. I understand if you want to bring down costs on things, that's affordability. Not when you're promising big government stepping in. But he's vowed to stay true to his democratic socialist roots. He said, I was elected as a democratic socialist, and I will govern as a democratic socialist. I will not abandon my principles for fear of being deemed radical. He reiterated his pledge to attempt to tax the wealthy and corporations to fund his proposals, which include universal child care and free buses. He placed himself in a lineage of New York mayors who focused their tenures on uplifting the city's most vulnerable, mentioning Bill de Blasio. Yeah, that's someone who you want to point to. Dave Dinkins, a fellow Democrat socialist, and LaGuardia. Mamdani said he would govern expansively and audaciously. We may not always succeed, but never will we be accused of lacking the courage to try. So we may fail miserably and cause taxpayers multi-millions, if not billions of dollars, but at least we had the courage to try. So you could have your free bus, which many people are calling essentially traveling homeless shelters if they're free buses, universal child care. Now, here's $1 million question. Will Hochul give in on some of these? I think she will. I think she's going to go to the far left because she's already endorsed Zoran. She knows now she's not going to lose to Blakeman. So why not go to the far left and be liked by the Democratic Socialists of America so there's no primary challenge against her or no real threat against her? New York, he said, could serve as a proving ground for Democrat socialist ideas across the country and even the world. Because remember, socialism has never worked every time it's tried, but the ego of Mr. Mamdani and the current Democrat Socialists of America leaders is, but maybe it'll work this time because it's us. Because it's us, because we're the smartest people to ever live, because the world revolves around us, we are the ones that are going to make socialism work this time. Never worked before. But darn it all, they never had Zoran Mamdani to lead their way. There are many who will be watching, Mamdani said. They want to know if the left can govern. They want to know if the struggles that afflict them can be solved. He called for unity and spoke to those still wary of him, like the Jewish community, I would hope, with his past anti-Semitic statements. In his speech, Mamdani sought to strike a tone of unity. If you are a New Yorker, I'm your mayor. Regardless of whether we agree, I will protect you, celebrate with you, mourn alongside you, and never, not for a second, hide from you. Bernie Sanders, as Ken had mentioned, playing a starring role. The last time Mr. Sanders, a senator from Vermont, swore in a mayor of New York City, it was 2017, and it was Mayor Bill de Blasio. Think of that. Is that who we're pointing to, the failure that was Bill de Blasio? The move was seen as an effort by Mr. de Blasio to boost his national profile at the time. 9 years later, Sanders was back to swear in Mamdani. Both men have focused their career on addressing income inequality and lifting up working-class Americans. Isn't that a nice way of putting socialism? And Mr. Sanders made multiple appearances with Mamdani during his campaign. AOC, who also spoke at the inauguration. At a time when hatred and divisiveness are on the rise, Mr. Sanders said the election of a Democrat socialist to govern the nation's largest city should be seen as an antidote. You showed the world the most important lesson that can be learned today. When working people stand together, when we don't let them divide us up, there is nothing we cannot accomplish. He invited old friends and potential allies to the stage. Yes, Governor Hochul was there. We learned that she supports his push for universal child care, but is skeptical of his proposal for free buses. I don't know. Do I want to go through the other ones? His father was there. Okay. Jessica Tisch was there. I guess Adams was there, right? He name-checked his New York favorites. He recalled fond memories of growing up in New York City, seeking to show that he understood the place he was raised, encountering those who view him as an outsider. He described eating large slices from Caranet Pizza, finding himself stuck on an idling N train, his first date with his wife at McCarran Park in Brooklyn, and arriving late to class at the Bronx High School of Science. Okay. Where else can you hear the sound of the steel pan, savor the smell of Sancoco, and pay $9 for a cup of coffee on the same block? Where else could a Muslim kid like me grow up eating bagels and lox every Sunday? The ceremony highlighted his faith, as we had mentioned, flanked by 5 faith leaders representing a range of religions. I know he had at least one Quran. I think there was 2 Qurans that he was sworn in on. And he finally tipped his hat to Mayor Adams, who later he would go in and sign executive orders, basically erasing a lot of what Adams did. Mamdani ran for mayor criticizing Adams. But he said, "Thank you, Mayor Adams, Dorothy's son, a son of Brownsville who rose from washing dishes." So now he's buddy-buddy, washing dishes to the highest position in our city. He and I have had our share of disagreements, but I'll always be touched that he chose me as the mayor candidate that he would most want to be trapped with on an elevator. All right. Enough on that. I guess they were calling the... I know, got to take a break. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We are back broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio on Marcus Street in Corning. Some comments from viewers. I agree. I don't think the support behind Blakeman is going to have the same momentum as Stefanik. Absolutely not. And the thoughts of Jokel and Mamdani running New York City is making me nauseous, not to mention scared. I understand. But no, there's not going to be the momentum. I don't see... I know we talked about it with Joe Sempolinski last time. He and I even would get people stopping on the street. Is she going to run? Is she going to run? There was actually excitement behind Stefanik. Now people are saying, who? Blakeman who? So, yeah, the excitement's not going to be there. There's going to be a lot of rank and file members of the Republican Party who would have went out hard and worked for Stefanik, would have went to fundraisers to see her, would have done as much, knocked on doors, made phone calls. They're not going to do that for Blakeman, unless I'm missing something. Comment from a different viewer. It's a shame that the promise of giveaways works to buy votes for low information, headline-driven sheeple. It's like once their candidate gets in, they don't pay attention anymore. They don't, because it was just not that many years ago where Bill de Blasio was considered a disaster. And they voted in Adams, and yet they're right back to Socialist 101. All right, Ken writes in, Frank, can you explain how making buses free will make them fast? I would think that these traveling homeless shelters would dramatically slow buses down, and unless they purchased a huge amount of new buses, dramatically reduce the amount of people able to get a seat on one of these crowded homeless shelters. I couldn't agree more. I guess it's really now a worry Mamdani won't be able to implement any of his socialist policies because he won't be able to raise enough money. So he will just do the Democrat thing of blaming the Republicans for his failure. Yeah, just like Hochul does. You're exactly right. He'll just blame the Republicans. But the thing is, like I said, Hochul has signaled her support, and I could see it in her budget for that universal child care, excuse me. So some of the things he will find the money for. As for the buses, of course they'd be slowed down. And how many people are going to want to ride a bus? I mean, I'm sorry to say it, but it's the middle of winter. We've seen the violent attacks by some on the streets in New York of people with mental problems. All of a sudden you get on a bus and 95% of the seats are taken as a warm, homeless shelter. I mean, that's essentially what it's going to be. So yeah, this wishful thinking by Mamdani, it's not even that. He just wanted to buy votes. Now, the fans were disappointed by the disastrous block party with no food or bathrooms at his swearing in. Around 10,000 supporters stood outside City Hall during the event, billed as the inauguration for a new era block party. They crammed into several barricade pens without access to bathrooms or any food concession stands. It's definitely not a block party, said one resident. He'd expect a mix of food and music at the festivities. Instead, he wore 3 layers of clothes to stay warm and said he and others are just stuck behind the barricades watching it on TV. Yeah, that's fun. Yeah, many people chanting after he got, think about this, after he got sworn in, tax the rich. That's all they look at, tax the rich. So the rich can leave in droves. I've got an example of that if we have an opportunity. But it must be nice to be a socialist. Hear me out on this. Bernie Sanders is an avowed socialist. And what does he have? 2 or 3 houses, a few vacation houses. You've got Ilhan Omar kind of pushing, at least in the squad, that kind of socialist idea. She's got $30 million in the bank. Socialist Zohran Mamdani's wife, Rama Douaji, attended the swearing-in ceremony with $630 boots. Maybe we should start taxing the rich. The rich that can wear $630 artisan leather boots from high-end designer. I don't think you care which designer it is. There you go. Made from vegetable tan cow leather and features an ultra-cushioned memory foam insole. The fashion firm charges $630 a pair for the so-called Shelley boots, which feature a 6-centimeter or 2.3-inch heel and a laced-up back. Boy, I'm telling you, it's got to be good to be a socialist. I need to borrow some money from the socialists. Mamdani's affordable agenda is a scam. His wife parades in $600 boots while he pushes rent freezes that'll collapse housing stock. They're moving into Gracie Mansion to dodge the chaos their policies create, said City Desk, New York City. The account continued, remember, this man of the people met his designer wife on Hinge while crafting a luxury aesthetic for his campaign. Real New Yorkers can't afford boots or rent. They're stuck with Mamdani's performative socialism and a city sliding into activist-run decay. Another critic proclaimed they're $600, but when he seizes the means of production, everyone will be able to afford them. You know, it's laughable, but let's face it, it makes you very angry when he pushes a socialist idea that's going to cost, let's face it, it's going to cost you and I too, being residents of New York. And his wife, of the socialist wife, is up there with $630 boots. I guess we're supposed to just laugh that off. But as I said, tax the rich chants broke out at the Bernie Sanders swearing in of why do I keep messing that up today? Zohran Mamdani. The raucous chants of tax the rich broke out as Sanders blasted the wealthy and called out hatred and divisiveness. At a time in our country's history when we are seeing too much hatred, too much divisiveness, and too much injustice, thank you for electing Zohran Mamdani as your mayor. Okay, I don't want to go with everything Sanders said. It gets your blood boiling, doesn't it? For too long, he argued, New York belonged to the wealthy and well-connected, but no longer with Mamdani in there. As he mentioned the predecessor, Eric Adams, boos broke out among attendees. The proud Democrat Socialist of America member assumed office at just 34 years old as the 112th mayor moments after midnight, and then they had that block party that was being called out for not really being much of a party. AOC said, New York, we have chosen courage over fear. We have chosen prosperity for the many over spoils of the few. This is a scary time. It's not laughable. It's scary. Like I said, he vowed to stick to his socialist agenda. He's not backing away from it. I was elected as a Democrat socialist, and I will govern as a Democrat socialist. I will not abandon my principles for fear of being deemed radical. The only expectation I seek to reset is that of small expectations. Beginning today, we will govern expansively and audaciously. This is what the people of New York City wanted. This is the wave of the future. We're going to talk a little bit more about it, but I do have to take a short break. I see a lot of comments coming in. Look forward to reading those. Stay with us. Don't think for a moment this Democrat Socialist of America party isn't on the rise, and that's why I think Kathy Hochul, who now doesn't really have to fear a Republican challenger, but could fear a third-party challenger with the Democrat Socialist of America, will probably go far left, affecting us all here in upstate. All right, stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking after this. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security and Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We are back broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. We have a lot of comments. One coming from Climate Fact Friday Bob. So that'll be coming up in just a second, so don't go anywhere. First off, we read Rick's statement. Trump says the Fed's chief job is one of the easiest jobs he's ever seen. That's why that kind of thinking will cause you to file for business bankruptcy 4 times. Trump will throw the economy and markets south as soon as he gets his hands on the interest rates. I know I watch these little clips of Trump interviews, and he always bashes the interviewer in the network, paper, or magazine they work for. They ask a tough question, he gets frustrated, and bam, Trump insults them. The other thing is that is obvious is that he self-destructs during the course of the interview. By the time the interview is over, you sit there shaking your head, wondering what did he end up saying. Then you go, Trump really is clueless, and what were people thinking voting that nut back in again? Wow. Let me ask though, and I know he does do that on occasions, but he has so many press conferences and so many opportunities for reporters to interview. Would you rather, just out of curiosity, would you rather have him go the Biden route and not be transparent, not talk to reporters? Is that more of what you're looking for? Just out of curiosity, because if you get frustrated by him doing so many interviews, and it's not every interview where he insults the interviewer, but I mean, you have a party, the Democrat Party, that when they're asked even a simple question, then attack the outlets that have been so favorable to them. Remember, Nancy Pelosi did it. We talked about it on the show. Biden did it, where you have the outlets that were protecting them through their whole careers. When they ask a tough question or a fair question, they push back and get nasty and snippy. So I think for you to just put that on Trump is kind of disingenuous. But I'll continue. Man, oh man, Trump the potty mouth, ranting and raving New Year's Eve about people. I'm just checking, but is this vulgar loser the one that is supposed to be guiding America? Despicable. He needs to go to church. Have a great 2026. I will find it interesting that you have a problem with swearing if you are a Democrat or if you support Democrat candidates, because that is their new tactic. That is their new way to make themselves look relatable. Look at Kamala Harris not that long ago, to look relatable with the common person. So again, it seems like a little bit of a hypocrisy, or like maybe a different, a hypocritical view, I guess, and not calling you a hypocrite specifically, but a hypocritical view. By the way, I would also add he is not a loser. He is the president of the United States of America. So he won that race in a landslide and with a popular vote and the electoral vote. So you can call him a loser if you want, but it doesn't add up, Rick. But thank you for writing in. Happy 2026. Mark writes in, I think Mamdani is going to crash, meaning all this free stuff, and that won't work, and rich people will leave in droves. I do think rich people will leave in droves. I agree. We're going to save Climate Fact Friday for Bob for the end here. Comment from a different viewer. This new mayor in New York will be a disaster. I agree. Comment from a different viewer. People don't think it impacts upstate New York. Well, I think it does. But I believe it absolutely does. Corning Inc. leans left and influences businesses and industries. Pam Walker, the newly elected mayor of Corning, also a Democrat. I don't care for what seems like insincere comments from her. I guess time will tell. I hope she proves me wrong. Thank you. And then a comment. What? Real leather boots, not vegan? No, she actually wore the socialist mayor's wife wore $630 boots, but they were, what was it called? Vegetable tan leather or something? I don't know. Maybe they're not vegan. I don't know. That's a great question. Maybe I did read that. I read vegetable, so I assumed it was a vegan thing, but I don't know. All right. Good morning, all, from Climate Fact Friday, Bob. Good morning, Climate Fact Friday, Bob, and I hope you have a great 2026. The company from Spain, I'm going to try this, Iberdrola, that owns NYSEG, costing consumers overpricing. They also own 77 wind and solar projects across 22 states in the United States that produce $9,000 megawatts or 9,000 megawatts of renewable power. Is that right? Not only are they overpricing their power to customers here in the United States, they're getting subsidies from the renewable power paid for by taxpayers. Seems like we're paying twice for our power. I believe there must be an investigation into this company. I'm so happy to be a customer of Steuben Rural Electric Co-op. The customers are the owners and partners of the company. We even get a dividend paid back to us in a check at the end of the year. Steuben Rural Electric Co-op gets their electricity wholesale from hydropower. Happy New Year to all and have a great weekend. Go Bills. Thank you, Climate Fact Friday, Bob. I appreciate that. Okay, before we take our last break here, so get your last minute comments in. Mayor Zohran Mamdani issued sweeping executive orders that wipes out most of the executive orders issued by Mayor Adams after his indictment. He wanted a fresh start. He vowed to reissue certain Adam-era orders from the period of time, including one that would maintain the Office to Combat Anti-Semitism. Yeah, I'm sure that'll be a strong group. But remember, I said DSA is getting, Democratic Socialists of America are getting powerful. Their leaders say they're ready to go to war for Zohran Mamdani against corrupt Albany. And many in Albany, remember, one-party rule, they're all Democrats pretty much in Albany. They have already said they're going to go farther left because they're so scared of this socialist challenger. So you're going to have an already far-left Albany going even farther left. But the New York City Democrat Socialist leaders saying they're ready to go to war for Zohran Mamdani against corrupt Albany. We got one last thing about Mamdani if we get a chance, so stay with us. We will be right back. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam, brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We are back broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio, wrapping up today's edition of Frankly Speaking. Some viewer comments. Ken writes in, nothing gets sheeple more motivated than telling them that the people with more money than them earned it by stepping on the sheeple's back, and that the plan is to take the money back and give it back to the sheeple, who rightfully deserve it. Jealousy is a powerful motivator, and getting free stuff is easier than working for it. Great point, Ken. Thank you for putting that in a very eloquent statement. Mark writes in, great show to start 2026. Have a great weekend. Well, thank you, Mark. I think it was a really good show. I do appreciate that. So from the New York Post editorial board, billionaires are fleeing California before crippling tax hikes. Should be a stark warning to New York leaders who want to put the squeeze on the wealthy to fund lavish leftist policies. The Post reported Monday that Google co-founder Larry Page and venture capitalist Peter Thiel are among the one percenters hatching escape plans from the Golden State to avoid getting slammed by a one-time tax that would force them to pony up 5% of their total wealth. That would cost each of them billions. The proposed tax isn't a sure thing. Proponents need to collect nearly 900,000 signatures to get the measure on the ballot come November. But the threat of it is enough to make big earners, low tax states like Florida and Texas, and all their money going with them. Governor Hochul, go wherever the wind takes her, who once crowed that she would oppose a wealth tax in Empire State, is already starting to fold like a cheap suit, with Democrat state lawmakers rubbing their own hands in glee. This is a dangerous game of chicken. The Empire State has already bled around $14 billion in recent years as hundreds of thousands pull up stake and head to red states with lower taxes. Hiking taxes wouldn't just send more people running for the exits. It also guarantees that fewer businesses and high earners set up shop here in the future. California is about to be reminded that the rich can move and take their money with them, and unless Hochul and the legislature curb Mamdani's worst excesses and stop treating the wealthy like cash cows, New York will be the next to learn that message. Comment from a different viewer. Since Trump pretty much endorsed Mamdani, I can easily predict the Dems will use it against him if the mayor fails. That could be, he said he was going to try to make Mamdani successful. So you raise a good point there. Fox News writes the White House race is underway with 2026 here. Both parties are already playing for 2028. Oh, I forgot to mention this. No, that's not even worth it. Democrats navigate internal divisions amid election wins. So the Hill writes that pretty much Democrats are shoo-in in the midterm, this and that, except for they can't stop the infighting. Listen, you're going to have the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America, that part of the party that wants to be far left as they possibly can. And that's what they'll probably go for when it comes election season. Rick writes in, he never sticks to the question. He's a chronic liar. This is in reference to Trump. Personally, if you vote party all the time, the best candidate doesn't always get elected. When I send in a comment about Trump, it's about Trump and no one else unless I name them. So stop making excuses up for that idiot and take my comments at face value. He is the worst ever. No one has ever seen anything like it. Well, I appreciate the name calling, Rick. That really helps prove your point. But if that's what you're saying, I think asking a fair question. But if you don't want any pushback whatsoever, you just want me to read like just right off of a script, I'm sorry, you're not going to get that. I apologize because I don't do that to others and I'm not going to do it for you. So there you go. Comment from a different viewer. Frank, excellent Friday show for 2026. Well, thank you. That's a nice comment. I do appreciate it. All right. That does it for today's edition of Frankly Speaking. Boy, what a week, huh? Get yesterday off and now... Oh, hey, this is a great way to end the show. Comment from a viewer. Are you still taking donations for the Salvation Army? Absolutely. You can send a check to them. You can drop by the studio. I still have the kettle, which I need to take over there soon. So it'd probably be best if you send it over to the Salvation Army here in Corning. Have a great weekend, everyone. We will be back Monday morning with Frankly Speaking, only on WYDC TV Big Fox. I look forward to it already. Have a fun, safe weekend. Thanks for joining us.